Hello parents and students, hope you're doing well. I know some of you are out there picking pinions. Come on back to the house when you do and check out the videos. Open up your homework packs and roast some pinions at the same time. For week 6 in your packet, you're going to have a package of squares like this. Okay. You can keep this package and the squares inside. Don't lose them. Don't play games with them. Keep them in your backpack. Keep them with your pencils because we're going to be using these for the next couple weeks. Don't lose them. Maybe mom or dad or grandma should be in charge of holding on to these. They're going to make things a lot easier. If you lose them, then things are going to be a little bit harder, and I'm only going to give you one set. So this is yours to have, but don't lose them. They have an opening at the top with a zip lock on it. So it's really handy. You can keep these together if you want. Open them up when you need them, put them back, and close the bag when you're done. I want you to count out 12 tiles. We're going to use 12 tiles, and you're going to need a piece of graph paper. I supplied the graph paper in your packet, but you need to get some graph paper, a whole bunch of it. If you don't have graph paper yet, remind dad, mom, grandma, aunt, uncle that when you go to Walmart to grab a pad of graph paper. You're going to need it. So we're going to look at area and perimeter. We're going to look at area and perimeter by using these squares. Oh, I kind of gave that away already. This is a square. This is what we measure area with. What unit is this square? Well, being a square is a unit, but we're also measuring using measurements for our areas and perimeters. This is exactly a 1-inch square. So these are 12 square inches right there. So I'm going to arrange these in a rectangle that's 4 and 3. If you know your math already, your brain's already saying, hey, I know what's going to happen here. This is a very simple start for us to look at area and perimeter and how they relate to each other. So what's the length from here to there? If you said 4, you're correct. Exactly 4 inches. What's the width from here to there? If you said 3, you're absolutely right. Okay? So how can we write this as an equation? Let's say I'm going to go along this side. I'm going to say, because I always like to start, like I said, with a small number. I'm going to say 3 inches. Okay, I measured that with the rulers right along here. Okay, 3 inches times 4 inches. And how many squares in the area? Remember, the area is measured in squares inside. How many squares did that give us? If you said that's 12 square inches, you're correct. Squares is a unit and inches is a unit. That's why we're putting them together. Now, what would the perimeter be? If you said 3 plus 4 plus 3 plus 4, now I'm not putting the inches in there. I could, because our unit is in inches. I'm not measuring squares anymore. I'm measuring just along the length around the perimeter of this rectangle. And you can say, this one is 7, and this one is 7, so this must be 14. So here's our area, and here's our perimeter. Now we're going to use these same 12 tiles. I'm going to change my rectangle a little bit to look like this. And the first question you have to answer is, did I subtract? Did I subtract any squares? If your answer is no, you're correct. Did I add any squares? Did I take any more squares out of my bag and add them to my rectangle? If you said no, you're correct. It's still how many squares? If you said 12 square inches, you're right. But you notice the shape changed. So this shape down here is going to measure what? If you said 2 inches, you're correct. This shape over here is going to measure what length? If you said 6 inches, you're correct. So this is 2 inches times 6 inches. How many squares does that give me in my area? I didn't add any squares. I didn't subtract any squares. And 2 times 6 is what? 12. The same squares I have in this shape were the same squares I had in the shape before that. Even though the shape changed, the area did not. I still have 12 square inches. What about my perimeter? Let's look at that. We have, again, 2 inches and 6 inches. So I'm going to have 2 inches. Well, I wrote the inch in that time, just out of habit. Wrong operation, right? We're doing addition now, because we're measuring length, not squares. I have 2 inches plus 6 plus 2 inches plus 6 inches. Again, I left my inches out because I don't want to repeat that. We can abbreviate a little bit, but my answer always have to have the units in it. And this is 8 plus, and this is 8. 8 plus 8 is what? You said 16, you're correct. Oh my gosh, look at this. Even though our squares stayed the same, our perimeter changed quite a bit. I went from 14 inches on the first model, and it changed to 16 inches in the second model. Let's try a third model. You're like, Mr. Budinger, a third model? Can we actually do 3 using the same 12? I'm going to try and fit that into this picture. We're going to do that one down here. And I'm going to do a model that looks like this. Once you're following along with your squares, you can pause the video anytime you need to. I'm going to fit one in each corner here. Okay, this is a completely different shape. It's still a rectangle, but it's a really long, skinny one. What does the end here measure? What does the end here measure? You can't see it in the video, but what is the width of this rectangle? If you said 1 inch, you're correct. What is the length of the rectangle? I don't know if you can see that down here in the corner. It's 12. What is 1 times 12? How many square inches do I have in my area? Oh my gosh, this is 12 also. Just like the shape I had up here, just like the shape I had here, just like the shape I had here. I had 12 squares. I didn't add or subtract any of them, but the shape completely changed depending on how I arranged them, but the area stayed the same. Now, here's the big question. What's the perimeter of this shape? Well, we already know we have 1 inch over in this side. And what's the length along here? If you said 12, you're right. So remember, we still have to go from this corner up an inch, down 12, down an inch, and back over 12. So this is going to be 1 inch plus 12 plus 1 plus 12. What's that going to equal? It's going to be inches. We're going along the perimeter, the outside. We aren't counting the area on the inside. It may look a little confusing, but remember, we're going around the outside and just measuring that length all the way around the outside. And we're measuring the length in inches. That's one of the units we're using because that's what's on this ruler here. We could also use centimeters. They make centimeter squares, but this is our unit that we're using for these squares. So we got 1 and 12 and 1 and 12. So this is 13 plus 13. What's 13 plus 13? I'm going to add my 1s first. That's 6. I'm going to add my 10s next. That's 2. Oh my goodness, 26 inches. I got 26 inches here, 16 inches here, and 14 inches here. These are all correct. The math works out. The shapes changed. The squares stayed the same, but the shapes of the squares changed, and that affected our perimeters. This one's almost twice the perimeter of this one up here. This one would be 28, would be twice this. So let's just look at that a little bit. Let's look at our 3 by 4. I'm just going to make a model over here. So this is concrete. We use squares that were the right size. Now I'm going to make a model. These squares are much smaller. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to go over 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So here's a model of 3 inches and 4 inches. And I get 12 squares, inches on the inside. That's what this shape looks like, a model of that shape. Let's go down here. I have 2 inches and 6 inches. Let me go 2 inches, 1, 2, and 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I have 2 inches there and 6 inches here. And this is still 12 square inches in the middle. Perimeter's changed, shape has changed, same squares. Now let's go down here. I think I could fit this in here. We had 1 square on this side and 12 along the length. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 1 up there, and then I'm just going to fill in the top one. So I had 1 inch here and 12 inches here, and still 12 squares, right? Inches. This one has 2 unit measurements. We're measuring the squares for the area, and these are square inches. Each one of these is a square inch. This is a model of it. It's much smaller, but I'm pretending that each one of these squares is one of these yellow inch squares. So you can see that depending on the shape, affects the perimeter. The area can stay the same, the perimeter is going to be different.